This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Hosni Mubarak insists he won't step down as president of Egypt until a successor is elected in September. But behind the scenes, U.S. and Egyptian officials have begun talks aimed at getting him to leave now, as demonstrators in Cairo have been demanding for more than a week. One plan calls for a transfer of power to the vice president until the election. At the White House today, President Obama said, quote, "The future of Egypt is going to be in the hands of Egyptians." Anti-Mubarak protests continue today in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Tahrir means liberation. But in contrast to the violence earlier this week that left at least 11 dead and scores injured, this rally was largely peaceful. Egypt's defense minister even visited with the protesters, and the curfew in the capital was relaxed. Meanwhile, there were more anti-government protests in other Arab countries, including Jordan. In Syria, a protest fizzled because of a police crackdown. Elizabeth Palmer in Cairo begins our coverage tonight.
What a difference 24 hours make. Instead of running street battles, demonstrators arriving at Tahrir Square this morning found smiling soldiers working with opposition organizers to set up checkpoints so no troublemakers got in. And if there was any doubt which side the army was on, this mob of Mubarak supporters was left on the outside looking in, blocked by tanks. Today, the square felt like the safest place in Cairo, with an air of celebration, but the underlying anger with Mubarak hasn't gone away.
He's dealing with us like a group of animals, not respectful people.
Opposition organizers called this the day of departure, and they asked for hundreds of thousands of people to come after Friday prayers. Well, they certainly got the numbers that they hoped for. The question is, will it be enough to force Mubarak out?
Do you think this is it? Is this going to do the trick? Is it going to make today the day of departure?
The guy is like Spider-Man. He's not going to let go. We need to push harder.
There are people in Egypt who are pushing for a compromise. A group of distinguished Egyptians known as the Committee of Wise Men has a proposal for Mubarak to remain president until elections this fall, but stripped of power. His vice president would take over immediately. The parliament would be dissolved and the protesters would get amnesty. We wanted to talk with one of the committee members, but because of Cairo's curfew, we had to do it on Skype.
The president would like to have a dignified exit. So I think these proposals constitute a sort of face-saving exit out of this situation.
This deal keeps intimates of Mr. Mubarak at the center of government, people that the demonstrators think are part of the problem, like the vice president. Why do you think they'll accept it?
They will have, at the end, to accept a sort of compromise.
But it's hard to believe that many people in this crowd, as tired as they are, would buy into any deal that allows Hosni Mubarak to remain president, even if it's only in name. In fact, the demonstrators, a few thousand of whom are still down there in the square tonight, have called for 3 more million-person marches next week. Katie?
And Liz, this new power-sharing agreement that you've described between the opposition leaders and the vice president, will Hosni Mubarak sign on to this?
That's the big question. He must be under enormous pressure, not only from the army and also his close advisors, but also from the business community. This country has been brought to a standstill by this upheaval, and many people are losing millions, if not billions of dollars a day. He's got to know that.
And Liz, I imagine the impact this has all had on the Egyptian economy is enormous.
Crippling. We were talking to an international banker earlier this evening who's desperate to get his system functioning again. He can't even fill the cash machines. They're running out of money. And of course, that means families are running out of money. Every day this goes on implies weeks of recovery down the road that's going to impose hardship on the whole nation.
And Egypt is already an immensely poor country. Liz Palmer in Cairo. Liz, thank you so much. Snapshots of what is happening in Egypt can be gleaned from Twitter. Here's a sampling of some that were written today. Sonia Verma, a correspondent for Canada's Globe and Mail, wrote, "To the men who saved my blank today, shooting into the air to fight back the crowd, shukran," which means thank you in Arabic. Mahmoud Salam, a Cairo-based blogger, tweeted, "When this is over, Tahrir Square will be the reason tourists will come to Egypt from now on." Another tweet reads, "For the rest of my life, I'll always remember how Tahrir Square today united people from all walks of life. I enjoyed every second immensely." And then there's this one. "We have gotten the word out to the world. Done. Now we have to get the word out to the people inside Egypt." There are many opposition groups in Egypt, but none as organized or as vilified as the Muslim Brotherhood. Its leader said today they won't run a candidate for president. Mark Strassman in Cairo has more about the Brotherhood, who they are, and what they want.
Long before the clamor of Tahrir Square, Hosni Mubarak heard one group's dissent and despised them for it. They're the Muslim Brotherhood, religious conservatives, often secretive and poorly understood. What is clear here, they want an Egyptian Islamic State. And this week they stepped out of the shadows and joined these protesters demanding Mubarak step down.
For so long, we have voiced our rejection of these criminal policies, which have spoiled all aspects of life in Egypt and all those who sought to express their opinion.
The Brotherhood, formed in 1928, is the world's oldest and most influential Islamic movement, and Hosni Mubarak's sworn enemy. Illegal in Egypt, but tolerated to a point. Its members frequently harassed and arrested by Mubarak's state police. As a social charity, the Brotherhood's won over many Egyptians. And in 2005, they startled Mubarak by winning 88 legislative seats, about 1/5 of Egypt's parliament. But last year, they boycotted or lost every seat in Mubarak's rigged elections. The Brotherhood rejects violence with some exceptions, and for that, groups like Hamas and Al-Qaeda have denounced them. But even here, some critics worry that the Brotherhood's political rise is a possible gateway to Islamic extremism. Fiercely pro-Palestinian, hardcore members want Israel wiped off the map. Others strike a more moderate tone. John Alterman is a Middle East expert and analyst in Washington. I spoke with him via Skype today.
So for all their talk of nonviolence, is there a part of them at least that is a little scary?
I think what's most scary about the Brotherhood is that we're not really sure how, if at all, they would change were they to come to power, would they to even rise in power.
But whatever the Brotherhood's political ambitions, Egypt remains a secular government, and most Egyptians want to keep it that way. Katie?
And Mark, as Liz reported, the agreement currently being discussed would prevent members of the Muslim Brotherhood from holding high office. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, they can't hold a high office, Katie, but they can run for parliament seats, and they would have a larger overall voice in the debate. This proposal, though, still has to be agreed upon by lots of folks, but there are lots of deep suspicions here, too, about the Brotherhood and what their long-range intentions are. Katie?
All right. Mark Strassman in Cairo. Mark, thanks so much. Let's go to Washington now and senior White House correspondent Bill Plant. Bill, I know the president spoke about Egypt this afternoon, but the White House has been clearly frustrated all week long. Are they making any progress at all?
Well, Katie, they sure hope so, but they don't know. Sources do tell CBS News that the U.S. is encouraging those talks between the Egyptian government and the so-called wise men. Their plan, as you'll recall, would have Mubarak remain president but transfer power to his vice president. And today, President Obama, for the first time, said out loud, almost, that it was time for Mubarak to step aside.
Now, I believe that President Mubarak cares about his country. He is proud, but he's also a patriot. The key question he should be asking himself is, how do I leave a legacy behind in which Egypt is able to get through this transformative period? My hope is that he will end up making the right decision.
Now, the administration remains very much in touch with the Egyptian government. Secretary of Defense Gates spoke for the fourth time today to his counterpart, and the president has been saying for a week that it has to be a time when the transition process begins, as he puts it, now. But nobody in Egypt seems to be paying any attention. Finally today, however, the president said that for the first time, discussions about the transition have begun. Katie?
All right, Bill Plant at the White House tonight. Bill, thanks so much.